Hello, hello, and welcome to all of you beautiful soul sisters. Thank you for joining me here today on the Heart of the Soul podcast. My name is Amana, and I am so happy that you're here. This is a space where we explore what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth, connecting about that which is often unseen and unspoken through the ancient ritual of storytelling. May soaking in these stories bring you closer to your own innate knowing and center you into a more embodied and alive version of your beautiful, unique self. Today is Thursday, October 24th, 2024. Our moon is currently half waning in Leo. Moving towards next Friday's November 1st is the lunar Samhain and a new moon in Scorpio, which is my sun sign. So that feels super exciting and fun. Today I have Tara Carlson here with me. She is local to my area. I have met her in person before, and we've recently reconnected on the gram. I've been loving all your offerings there with talking about nervous systems and meditation and your wild woman era, and I'm super excited to dive deeper into some of those topics with you here today. I would love for you just to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and however you like to introduce yourself and sort of what brought you to this soul work that you're doing with people today.
Thank you so much for having me, Amana. Yeah, I can already tell this is going to be a good podcast because just listening to you introduce yourself and then me, I was like starting to tear up a little bit. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be juicy. So my name's Tara Lynn Carlson. I like to use my middle name because my initials TLC are very special to me and very intentional. Thanks, Mama. Thanks, Dad. So I guess I like to, in this era, I like to introduce myself first as just compassionately curious about life, and I don't like to identify as one role or one thing that I do, but I guess it's a huge part of what I do and a huge part of what I love about living. So I am a nervous system body worker and a soul coach and a speech therapist. Mm-hmm. But I am also a wife and a dog mom and an adventurer and a sister and an auntie. Yeah. Yeah, just to name a few things.
And yeah, I saw that you do like, I don't remember how you worded it, but like shamanic soul retrievals.
Yeah, shamanic soul retrievals. So that's kind of part of my soul coaching. I was trained under one of the very few shamans here in the Spokane area, Jo Beth Eckerman, who kind of took all of her ancient wisdom. She was deemed a shaman when she was 6 years old, and she has taken all that she's learned. She trained under Aboriginal tribes when she was 13, and now she's in her 60s, and she's just kind of taken all that she's learned and really made it into this more modernized way of having access to tapping into our inner wisdom and tapping into our intuitive abilities, tapping into our past lives. And so that's a big part of what I do now. And I've been told by counselors, I tend to have a lot of clients that are counselors and therapists. And so I've been told that there's a lot of internal family systems kind of work woven into the the work that I do, and then also hugely revolving around heart math technology as well. So
Mhm.
heart math science, yeah.
Cool. Okay. So nervous system, I feel like more and more people are like recognizing it, understand, like learning more about our nervous systems and how that affects our day to day. And I'm wondering for you, so it sounds like maybe you went to like speech language pathology school, and then like in that, did they talk anything about nervous systems, or when were you introduced to that awareness, and how, yeah, how has that been brought forth in your life?
Yeah. So they did not talk about it in school at all. But because I became a speech language pathologist, um, I guess it's kind of a twofold answer to that, because my graduate program is what gave me probably the most anxiety and the most nervous system dysfunction that I had ever experienced. Um, I leading up to grad school, I was never someone who could get good grades easily, and school was just very challenging for me. And and grad school was very competitive, and so it was. And I got my undergraduate degree was in communication sciences and disorders, so very specific to, you can only go to speech therapy school. That is the only path that you can do with this degree. So I was kind of locked in. Um, After taking a year off, though, I got into grad school off the wait list on 10 days before grad school started. Um, so I got my degree. I was learning a bunch about my own nutrition, trying to heal my chronic constipation as well as my chronic anxiety that I was experiencing. And about 9 months after getting my first job, hating it, feeling like I had chosen the complete wrong path for myself, um, just being so depressed, it was told about a holistic clinic here in Spokane that did a very specific type of body work. Even speech language pathologists got to do this body work because it was targeting the dysfunctional neural pathways that were resulting in developmental and cognitive dysfunction, which includes speech and language dysfunction as well, and disorders. So I started working for this clinic, and they paid for all of my training. So my training is in Mozgotova's neurosensory motor reflex integration, MNRI for short, or just reflex integration. She now has a school. She's an incredible neurodevelopmental therapist that has coined this amazing but very complex form of body work that has helped people, specifically children, but also adults, come out of deeply traumatic experiences. So,
And did you experience that work on yourself? Or
yes. So
yes.
one of the amazing things about working with this clinic was that, well, first of all the classes we practiced on each other. When I first started at this clinic, I was having panic attacks pretty regularly in my own life,
Mhm.
probably 3 times a week. Um, and as I started to have these big releases in my body, and where I would have like intense pain and then it would just go away. Or I would have intense lack of focus, and then all of a sudden I would be focused. So we also got to work on each other fairly regularly, and actually the most notable moment for me, because I was still in the grind. I was still seeing between 12 and 16 kids a day, which is insane, and doing between 12 and 16 notes, like like a doctor, and just staying until 7 at night every night. And so even though I was doing this work that was so healing for all of my clients, I was still very dysregulated. Um, but the actual, my favorite moment truly was when I offered to work on a parent of a kiddo who he was really young, and he was suicidal and threatening, and just having a lot of external behaviors that was dysregulating the shit out of mom, understandably so, right? And she was doing everything that she could, and she was just kind of going further and further into herself, becoming more and more kind of complacent. And so one day she came in so dysregulated, more so than normal, and I said, how about I work on you? And even though that got me written up and eventually got me to lose my job, thank you, universe. It was the most profound moment, because after 15 minutes of working on her, she was crying, and she just sat up and said, "This is how my son feels when you work on him." And I just remember saying, "I hope so. That's the goal, you know, and it's going to take a lot more than just one time. But yes, this feeling that you're feeling right now, this regulated state, this release, this permission, yes, this is what I hope that your son feels when he receives this work." So, and that kind of got me into wondering, okay, maybe I need to be working on adults. Maybe I
Mm.
need to be working on other people that have experienced the same hardships that I've experienced. Because
Mm.
prior to that, I was so in my head. I was that typical cognitive behavioral model, that because that was what I was taught in speech therapy school, was there's an antecedent and then you have a behavior, and you figure out how to change the antecedent so that the behavior changes, right? And so, I mean, I was journaling since I was really, really young, but I was doing yoga when I was 19. I was journaling hardcore at that time. Like, I was doing all the things that were supposed to help the anxiety that I was experiencing, right? And alleviate it. I was going to therapy. But in that moment, with that adult, with that parent, I realized I hadn't been experiencing it in my body.
Mhm.
I hadn't been letting my body catch up to my brain. And so
Yes.
all of the information that I was learning, of course I was forgetful. Of course it wasn't sticking, right? Because my
Mhm.
body wasn't believing any of it.
Mhm. And how did that change? Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, just getting a better relation, having a better relationship with my body. So I started dialing in closer with my nutrition. I started dancing as a
yes.
form of meditation.
Oh, I love dance. I was like,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Um, and then what that opened up for me was all of these different possibilities that didn't come from my head, that didn't come from that prefrontal cortex, that planning, that initiating, that, higher level place that we're as humans so blessed to have, but also We have a brainstem. We have a brainstem that needs, and we have amygdala that needs attention, that needs support, that needs to feel safe and secure and heard and seen. And that can only happen with how we sense the world.
Mm.
That can only happen with allowing ourselves to find that security, to see more and to hear more and to sense more. Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm just still sort of like feeling into what you're expressing there. Could you share it in like a personal story of a way that you've experienced that?
Yeah. It just feels like such different
Mm.
it feels like so many different lives that I've lived since this initial moment.
Yes.
And I'm kind of it's interesting because currently I'm kind of in a new pattern that is mirroring some of my old patterns, if that makes
Mm.
sense, in
Mm-hmm.
some ways.
Yeah.
In a phase where I'm kind of, I would say, kind of in the valley a little bit. One of my best friends always says, you know, we have peaks and we have valleys in our lives. And um, even though I currently am experiencing so much more ecstatic states than I ever have, I'm also experiencing so many more low states than I've ever have. Um, so to reflect feels like I need to just kind of bring it closer to me. Yeah, closer than I. It's kind
Hmm.
of bringing me, like, honestly, and I love this, but it's kind of bringing me to some dysregulation, which is really good. It's a good reminder because I'm have so many more tools than I had before. Um,
Or maybe you could, I know that it's so hard, some of this type of work that you do, and I feel like I do as well, it's can feel sort of like ineffable, like it's hard to put words to it sometimes, the experience. But maybe you could share a little bit about how you, in whatever way that you are able to like explain this work to potential clients or women that are interested in this for themselves. Like, why would a person want to do this nervous system work within themselves?
yeah, yeah. So, so typically, women and children, those are kind of my two clientele base currently, will come to me after they've been in therapy for years
Mhm.
and or the
Talk
kids have been what's that?
talk therapy is what you
Yes,
mean with
talk
therapy.
therapy. Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Mental health therapy, which side note, I work in a mental health counseling office and I'm a huge proponent for.
Sure.
Um,
And I feel like nervous
and
system work is
yes, and that's why I'm there, and that's why they have made a point to bring me into their office is because they recognize that talk therapy can cue to our bodies that we're in that same traumatic state. And if there's nowhere for those cues to go. So when I say cues, really that's our reflexes. So if I kind of go back a little bit to like the basis of what a reflex is. You put your hand on a hot stove and you pull it away before it gets burnt, right? You don't think in your mind, I need to pull my hand away. There's no thoughts that are happening because
Yeah.
yes, exactly. That's a much longer pathway that I would have to take. So what I find a lot of women and now children are doing is compensating for that in between. So where they actually have to think about, I need to take my hand away, but then there's already been injury at that
Mm.
point, right?
Yeah.
There's already been some kind of physical or emotional injury to the area of the body or to the emotion center, right? To the heart. Let's just call it what it is, right? And so what reflex integration does is it clears those paths so that the side road becomes a superhighway. So the side road of trying to bypass the brainstem or bypass the emotions, trying to go through our frontal lobe and trying to go through all of the cognitive processes, realizing that's a very long path. It's a much quicker, more efficient, and complete path. So another example of a reflex is the Moro reflex. So when a baby is born, you'll often, if they're not breathing right away, sometimes, I don't know if they do this anymore in the hospitals or if parents intuitively do this, but sometimes they'll sort of drop them on their backs, right, to initiate gravity. And the reason for that is because our first breath of life is not actually our lungs and diaphragm moving on its own. It's because gravity is being pushed up into our bodies and then it initiates the breath. So without gravity, so that's why, again, I don't know if they actually do this anymore, but I've seen it done. I've seen it done for babies that aren't breathing right away.
I have never. I would not do that to a baby, but
yeah. I wouldn't either, but I understand the sentiment of it because, and I think it's, again, total side note, but allowing the baby to find that on their own, right, is really the goal.
Yes, the first breath, and sometimes happens right away, and sometimes it's several minutes, and there's a natural window of our first breath, and
they're going to feel gravity one way or another. It doesn't have to be all of a sudden just because someone is inflicting fear into us that it's not going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
But another example I'll use, it's one of my favorite examples to use with adults, is the hand supporting reflex. So all of these reflexes, they have a protective meaning and a cognitive meaning. So hand supporting reflex, you fall forward, your hands are going to come out in front of you and catch yourself so that you don't hit your head.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the protective meaning. The cognitive meaning is to actually help us set boundaries.
Ooh.
So one of my all-time favorite videos that I like to show is of these two little 2-year-olds, because up until about 2, our reflexes are pretty obvious. Our primitive reflexes are all that's kind of keeping us going, right? Keeping us alive, I should say. And so these 2-year-olds, this one little boy is really wanting to kiss this little girl, and this little girl doesn't want to be kissed, so she's pushing him away, and she keeps just pushing him away. Mind you, no parents are coming in, oh, don't push, right? The little boy's not hurt. Everyone's safe. Everyone's fine. And she just keeps pushing him away. It takes about, 20 pushes. And then he gets up off the ground after the last one, he puts his hand out as if to ask for her hand, and then he kisses her hand. And in that moment, both parties, both little ones, developed a healthy hand supporting reflex. They developed a healthy sense of boundary, right? Ability to hold their boundary and be met appropriately with the boundary that they've set.
Mhm.
So an example of how pain and how injury can kind of disrupt these reflexes. Let's say somebody falls down the stairs and one hand gets caught on the railing and they can't catch themselves fully. They can only catch themselves with one arm. Not only are they going to have pain likely in the arm they caught themselves on, likely in the arm that they caught their bodies on, not they caught their arm on the banister, right? Because it's now compensating. It's now doing all of the work that we should be able to do with both of our hands. So kind of coming back to how I implement this with especially my women, children, again, is my one true, root of who I started working with, and I do love working with children. But my personal experience is what makes working with women so special to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because they'll come in having done all of the cognitive work, but I'm still not sleeping. I'm still taking, 3 Ambien a night. I have so much physical pain on the left side of my body. I had a recent client who was having intense tremors, like shakes all over her body, and they weren't physiological. They had no cause. She'd been to the doctor. There was no obvious reason for them. And after 6 sessions, they were completely gone with me working on her nervous system and just giving her nervous system, basically, I like to think of it as an exit point so the old can clear and I can give a new direction and a stronger response in the body.
Yeah, I've heard, I don't know if this is what you're speaking to, but I've heard about it in a way that we can get stuck in a record skip of a nervous system response.
Yes.
And then we might need some assistance to move forward out of that record skip, a different, speaking of a different path. And that, to complete maybe this place we're stuck, to complete that and then move forward. Is that?
Yep. That's perfect. So it's theorized that the first big trauma that we have in our lives and the way that we respond to it is the way we're going to respond to stress for the rest of our lives. So exactly what you're saying, we're going to continue responding in that exact same way. Even if it doesn't work for us at that higher level, it worked for us at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So our body is this has worked for us at one point. So it's what we know. It's what we need to do. It's all we know how to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, if we try to think our way into a new pathway, our bodies don't believe it. So they can't listen. They can't listen to something that isn't possible, right, for the body. So
Yeah.
I like to kind of say that what my work does at the core is it opens us up to more healing. It opens us up to allow in a new normal, a new regulated state of being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
What does the word soul mean to you?
Oh, I love this question. I really sat with this before recording today, and I was trying to come up with all these cool words, and I had to really avoid old Tara's pattern of let me look this up and see what other people think. And Nope, and I did not do that.
Way to go. I don't always like tell people that this inquiry is coming, so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's so good. The word soul to me is kind of like a blueprint that connects us to the whole rest of the world. It's like, for some reason, the first thing that came to mind was like mycelium, like from
Mm.
mushrooms, like going into the earth and then connecting. Like the mushroom doesn't necessarily know about all the paths that their mycelium is taking from them,
Mm.
right? Because it's not just from them.
Yeah.
And they don't have to know to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, is that too simple? But you know,
That's profound. Yeah.
yeah. So I think our soul is something that we get to connect with. It's something that we get to constantly learn about, and it's something that connects us to the greater world, the greater love that exists,
Hmm.
um, effortlessly, right? Easefully.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love asking that question because there are so many, unique responses. I don't think I've ever had someone say the same thing that another person did.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Yeah.
So good.
And yes, okay. So you do something with people that you call a soul retrieval. Have you experienced a soul retrieval yourself?
Oh yeah.
Like, and maybe could you describe that experience for people who have never even heard of what a soul retrieval is?
Yeah. Yeah. So before I even knew I wanted to be guiding, I was receiving soul retrievals from my shaman, on a regular basis. And at the time that I found my shaman, she kind of took over talk therapy. Like I stopped talk therapy and started going to her instead.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time doing it, and she explained it to me. There was going to be a lot of visual support and visual guidance. And I remember thinking to myself, because at that time I'd been meditating pretty regularly, and I thought that I had a pretty deep inner practice with myself. Um, but I also had this limiting belief that I never had visuals during my meditations. Even during some medicine journeys, I didn't have any visuals. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I'd love to share that because it's I think still a very important part of my journey. Um, but I so she guided me through this um, um, heart lock meditation where you bring the heart and the mind into resonance with each other because our heart is 4 to 60 times more powerful than our brain, and has our heart actually has little tiny brain cells on it. And so she brings you into resonance, your heart and your mind into resonance, and she helps you build this bubble around you, calling on the 7 directions. So northeast, southwest, heaven, spirit above, earth below, and then our heart being the seventh direction. And we blow up this bubble, and then we go to our favorite nature space, we connect with earth. And I remember instantly feeling my nature space. I remember instantly feeling the presence of my bubble. I didn't necessarily see it. It was extra effort to bring in the visual aspects of it, but I remember feeling and sensing it in my body. And I
Yeah.
just went with it. And she was a great guide at just telling me to trust and allow to whatever came in. And within a couple sessions, I met one of my little spirit guides, and my little, she may or may not be a past self, but to me, she was just a spirit guide from when I was 8. And she was this little, she was dressed up like a little wolf, kind of like where the wild things are, and she was dancing around a fire.
Oh,
And um, ugh, so grateful, because she's been the grounding, like, reminder that this work works and that this work is important, and that it was just really a remembering of a part of me that I had lost, a part of me that I wanted to forget, right? And so over several sessions, I really worked with her and with the spirit guide and with my shaman, and the visuals started to become easier. I started to tune in more to my intuitive powers of actually hearing things, and sensing. So I've learned that I'm more of a clairsentient, occasionally a clairaudient, and even though that visual piece still like never came in as much as I thought I wanted it to, every session was so powerful, and I would leave feeling this sense of relief for a different part of myself, and feeling relief too that I didn't have to go home and journal and do all these different habits in my life to have this be my new state of being. Like, it already was. I just opened it up, right? So it was kind of another form of opening up my awareness. Rather than opening up my nervous system, it was opening up my intuition,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So, um, yeah. So when I guide people in these soul retrievals, typically we go back to a time where they felt that same feeling that they're currently stuck in, right? And I'll say the first time, or the most perfect time, the most important time, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be the very first time.
Mhm.
Um, and we'll basically reparent. We'll get to be another body. It will get to be in this current state that we're in, reparenting that old version in the ways that they could have been, should have been supported,
Mhm.
right? And while some people will have more past lives kind of come in, for the majority of my clients, it'll be on this current timeline, because there's a lot to be healed on this current timeline, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But what's really beautiful is my little wolf girl, in a recent-ish session, or in one of my last sessions with my shaman, um, I got to watch her transform into like a full wolf. And it was this really, really beautiful. It was kind of a morbid, a little bit, like literal, like going into this wolf carcass, like, and then this wolf carcass, like, engulfing me, but in this way of like, this is who you've always been. Now you get
Yeah.
to reclaim and claim it.
Yes.
So yeah. um
Well, cool. Yes. I would love to ask you a little bit more about oracle cards. I was listening to like one of your, I think it was maybe your recent podcast episode, and you were talking about using one of Rebecca Campbell's decks, and you use it for yourself and with clients. And so for me, I'm about to be 42. But I remember it wasn't until I was like in my 30s where I encountered like my first deck of oracle cards.
Yeah.
And I feel like I had heard about them, but then in my young like teens and 20s, I was um, curious about and within the realms of like Christianity. And in that space, those people were telling me that those were like bad, dangerous, scary, not to be touched or used or anything like that. And I'm wondering, and then for me, it was like in my 30s being like, oh, actually, like these, I feel drawn to them and I want to experiment with them and use them in my life and have a practice with them. And over the last, decade, I have developed that practice and enjoy using them in my life. And I wonder if maybe you would tell me and us a little bit about oracle cards for you, and like when did you start exploring with them and playing with them, and how they impact your life and the your clients as you about using them there as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because it was definitely very playful when I started using them. I was introduced by a friend who had probably like 40 different oracle decks that we would just pick and choose and play with at any given point. And sometimes we would do actual tarot, which is different, right, than oracle.
Yeah.
Um, it mirrors it, but also what I found with tarot and the way that people use tarot is as kind of a roadmap that's very specific
Mhm.
and has, equal dark light kind of connotations to it. But it's just so, to me, it felt really rigid when I was getting my tarot read, and it just felt like someone else was trying to tap into me instead of empowering me to tap into me,
Mhm.
is what it kind of felt like. So
Okay.
I was really drawn to oracle cards honestly, when I used it as a tool for myself to kind of confirm and validate a lot of the times where I was already at.
Mhm.
And so I really love them as a tool that's kind of playful. I love it to use as a tool that helps bring me back into my heart and out of my head, but gives me different words for it, right? Because it's so easy to have the same words in our heads for what we think we should feel or what we think, has gone on in the past, so must be going on now, right? And so I found oracle cards as a really beautiful way to tap into my intuition and
Mhm.
to honor that there is this thing that we're connected to, that you don't have to have a name for it. You can call it God, you can call it whatever, you can call it spirit, source, but there is something that is so much bigger than just what's in your head, right? And even just what's in your body, right? Um, so usually I'll just do a 2 or 3 card spread for my clients or for myself. But just this week I did do an 11 card spread, kind of just for fun. Again, I try to let it be playful.
Yeah.
Um, but what I love and what I loved about this 11 card spread this week was that it provided my client to pick and choose what she was ready to hear, and to pick and choose what she was ready to actually implement and actually absorb into her current state of being,
Mhm.
right? Because again, if our bodies are so locked into a pattern, hearing something, and this is why I have sometimes a difficult time with channelers, some channelers, because I think they can be like, hey, your spirit guides need you to know this. They need you to know this. And they're like punching it into your body. And the person's like, oh, ow. Like, that hurts. Like, and it's okay to hurt, but also if that person isn't regulated enough to let that hurt go into their body and go into other spaces, and they aren't regulated enough to sit with it, it can be another traumatic experience for them.
Mm.
Right? So oracle cards have just allowed me to, or I should say allowed my clients to open up their own intuitive powers of like, take what you need from this.
Yeah, trust yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Like, this wasn't from me. These aren't just my words. This is, this is Rebecca Campbell's words, or this is, this is spirits, but this is coming divinely channeled.
Mhm.
So, and you don't need to understand all of it right now.
No.
You get to have this information, and maybe 3, 4, 10 years down the road, you'll think back and go, oh, that's why I needed to hear that at that time.
Right. And the messages that like need to come back to you, they will return to you. Like the
Exactly.
messages keep coming.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, it's
100%.
okay. Like
Yeah.
they say, you have to like hear something so many times before it like fully absorbs.
Yes.
So I love how you speak about meditation and that like I know Brene Brown speaks about meditation that like a lot of people think that it has to be sitting still.
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown talks about her meditation is her swimming. Like she swims in her meditation or walks, she moves while she meditates. So would you please share with people that don't want to try meditation or are afraid to try it because they don't want to or can't sit still?
Mm-hmm.
What ways can they meditate? And yeah.
I love this question. And I love speaking about meditation because, as somebody who is a chronic fidgeter and doesn't really like to sit still either, I have found that meditation can be in so many different forms. One of my favorite, actually, side note quotes that I can't remember who said this, so I wish I could credit them, but it was along the lines of, if you say that you can't meditate because your mind is too busy, that's like saying that you shouldn't take a shower because you're too dirty,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So for me, it always comes back to like, why am I doing this? Okay, because my thoughts are a little bit all over the place because I'm noticing a lot of judgmental thoughts, so coming back to an intention. But I teach meditation once a week, and my most favorite meditation to teach is a shaking meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually started really with dancing as my meditation, um, and just dancing around this room, any other rooms I've been in the past 5 years, um, letting music of any kind, even at live music, even at in the festival or concert realm, like letting music go through my body and letting it be the only thing that I'm focusing on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why most meditations will have you focus on your breath, which, yes, is beautiful, and breath awareness is really important and really beautiful. But can you have that same awareness when you go about your day? Can you have that same loving awareness when you're making your coffee, when you're talking to a friend, talking to someone who isn't a friend, right? Um, and often we're not just sitting. I mean, some of us, I guess, if we work home, but most often, ideally, right? We're not just sitting. So why would we bring in a new skill in a completely different state of our body? Why
Mm.
not bring in that new skill using a medium of the body and allowing ourselves, okay, instead of following the breath, can you just follow where your feelings go in your body? Can you follow, oh, this arm is moving in this way, and now it's moving in this way? Can you follow the sensation that you get when you roll your neck side to side? And just be with it, right?
Yeah, like following your impulse rather than getting
Yeah.
upset about it.
I what I love about and what I'm so passionate about with the work that I do is that I'm bringing everything that's here in our heads down. I want it to come down so that it can be processed and then ideally given back to earth, right? Whether that be through our feet or through our arms, right? Or through our faces. um, but I'm so passionate about letting kind of taking out this stigma that meditation has to be done seated, that it has to be done in this very specific way. Um, you know, and in that same note, because I've given myself permission to meditate in all the ways, I love a good seated meditation. I love a good prayer session of just sitting with what is here.
Yes.
But it wasn't always that way, and it's not always that way still.
Hmm.
Just
Oh,
last week. Go
oh,
ahead.
I was going to ask you to describe. So, like, you spoke about what a shake that you do shaking meditation, or that's what you teach once a week.
Yeah.
And so, but what for people who might not know, like, what is that? Does that mean you're shaking the whole time, or you're shaking parts of the time, or like?
Yeah. So I really like to work with duality. So I usually guide people to start in their hearts. We'll start standing up. We'll start swaying side to side, which cues to the body that we're trusting and that we're open. Um, it starts the ability for the right and left hemispheres to connect. They connect through the corpus callosum. So we have the right and left movement, plane of movement. Um, and then I will cue people from usually starting from their feet to bend and straighten their knees and trying to get some part of their body to shake. So some part of their body to have a residual movement from the proprioception that you're giving it, from the impulse that you're giving it, right? I like to do this to melodic house music because there's some new research coming out that there's a specific hertz frequency of melodic house music that actually resets our nervous system and puts us into more calm states, those rest and digest states. So, and it's playful and it's fun. So it gets people out of their head that they need to have a specific, they need to clear their minds, right? Because that alone can be so dysregulating for somebody who's not used to sitting with what's there, right? Who hasn't done it, who's been, you know, a chronic like doer, right? Which is so many of us, especially women coming out of the feminist movement, right? We've got to do because we've got to be as good as our masculine counterparts, right? Um, instead of different, but
Yeah.
instead of complementing. Um, but yeah, so then I'll guide as rigorous shaking as you can to feel comfortable for about 10 to 12 minutes. Is kind of when the sweet spot happens, at least 8 minutes. So about 3 songs, 2 to 3 songs. And then I'll do this for as long as 20 to 30 minutes. But when I'm guiding, I like to have that, like I said, duality of coming back to stillness after you've shaken it all up.
Yeah.
Um, because that's when people start to get the clarity that they're initially hoping for. That's when people can start to feel, oh, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to feel like. There's so much space between my breaths that I didn't even know was there, between my thoughts. And it's like this, it's this literal mirroring of like of musical frequencies, right? Where it's going back and forth, fast, 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 and then you slow it down and you can feel the slowing down happen in your body,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So,
Mhm.
and then we end again in that side to side plane of movement, coming all the way back to stillness,
Yes.
coming back to our hearts.
Take people sort of full circle into that experience.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if have there been a something or a few somethings that are coming up in your life or in women's life? Like, is there something that you're encountering that a lot of women don't know that you wish that they did?
Yes. I think, hmm, let me feel into that for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Take your time.
And actually, this might be a good time. I didn't think I was going to have to go to the bathroom, but I'm going to have to
Yeah,
go.
let's do it. Let's take a look.
I love this question so much, and I'm so glad I got a moment to kind of sit with it. I would love for all women to know that where you are right now is perfect, and that we don't have to use our minds as much as we think.
Mm,
That we
yeah.
get to use our bodies as this, again, I don't want to keep using the word tool, but it's not a tool. It's the way that we express, and it's the way that if we didn't have a body, we wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't have a reason to connect. We wouldn't have a way to connect with spirit guides or to connect with anything,
Mm.
right? And so what I really want all women to know is that the connection that you have needs to start with yourself. And that does not mean self-care, take a bubble bath. That means, what does it actually feel like to take away the shoulds, to take away that shame of what you think you should or could be doing? And what is it like to just feel and give yourself permission to feel without a story, without a reason?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I
You're
love that.
experiencing grief and you have no perceived obvious reason for experiencing grief. It's okay. You're allowed.
Yeah.
See
Mm.
what that opens up to just let yourself.
Hmm. Right. I think sometimes, especially with an emotion like grief, like we can want to move away from it rather than lean into it or towards it.
Mm-hmm.
But it will circle back for you if
Yep.
you're
Yep.
not in space for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been recent moments when I was speaking earlier about the peaks and the valleys and me being in this valley recently where I have experienced grief, and after letting myself really sit in it, after really letting myself be with it without letting it consume me, because I can hold grief and joy at the same time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Zenith Virago actually even says that they're the same. She's
Mm.
a step walker, and she says that joy and grief are the same.
What?
Yeah.
That is, I can absolutely. Mm.
Yeah. I'll link that episode in the show notes below here. So if you're,
Yeah,
yes.
I'll have to give that a listen too. That's cool. That's really
Yes.
cool.
So I would love to circle back to you were speaking about something else, but you mentioned a medicine journey and your personal experience with that. Would you be willing to share more about it?
Yeah, I would love to. So, um, a little over 2 years ago, um, my husband and I had just gotten back from a couples retreat in Costa Rica for our honeymoon.
Mm.
And we were in probably the very beginning stages of the worst part of our relationship. Um, Very necessary, and we're very, very gratefully out of it. But it was a long 2 years. Um, but we decided a week after getting back from Costa Rica that we wanted to do a guided sound journey. It was a 6 hour long sound journey with um, psilocybin and medical grade MDMA. And we were blindfolded. The sound journey went on for about 5 hours, and we were instructed to just lie there for 5 hours.
Whoa.
And going into this, I was like, okay, like the medicine is and the sound combined is going to help it. I was a little nervous about just laying there.
Mhm.
But the two things combined, I should be able to do this. I'm gonna, I will be blindfolded, so I'll have my senses of vision will be heightened, and I might have some visuals for the first time in my life. I had all these kind of preconceived notions
Mhm.
that I was quickly learned were lessons.
Yeah. Your
So,
expectations.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So for 5 hours, I was in complete darkness. I was my body was experiencing gratitude and openness and peace. Or I should say, my heart was experiencing those things, but my body was not
Mhm.
in coherence with that.
Mhm.
So for those 5 hours, my hips shook, like trembled. I just trembled, and I just let it because I didn't know what else to do. Looking back, and what I've learned, and it's taken me a really long time to kind of reflect on this, and like why did I have no, like, virtually nothing? Like, it was just darkness, nothingness. And and of course questions going through my mind of like, why was I shaking? And I had some thoughts of what I had heard and what people had postulated and theorized, like, obviously that's your sacral area. That's a lot about security. That's, you know I've had sexual trauma, so maybe I was releasing that. But none of that really felt quite right. None of that felt like it was, yeah, none of it felt quite authentic. And it was actually just maybe a couple months ago where I was speaking to one of my closest friends about it. And she mirrors back to me and she goes, wait, you had to lay down and be still? Why couldn't you get up and move and dance? And I was like, well, I don't know why. Because I thought that was the rules. Like, and it kind of was. I mean, we were crammed into a little tiny church like building.
Mhm.
So what I'm gaining from it now, over 2 years later, is I'm not meant to stay in one place. I'm not meant to process emotions like that.
Mhm.
Because I wasn't able to.
Yeah.
It wasn't, even with the medicine, even with the sound, my body needed an outlet. My body needed a way to physically move it somewhere else. It
Mhm.
was just sitting and festering and stirring and just. So now, kind of coming full circle, when I go to live music, specifically festivals, and some of the music I listen to is pretty intense and pretty ridiculous and pretty goofy, I dance the shit out of that entire time that I am there. And I move as much as my body wants to move. And I don't hold back. And that to me has been more healing than any quiet or sedentary experiences.
Yes. Love
So,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, healing happens in all sorts of ways,
yeah,
and not always the ways that we're expecting or expected to heal.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I
Mm.
just love that this body can be such a vessel for healing in however we allow it to. And, I think kind of coming back to like our senses,
Mhm.
coming back to like our intuitive abilities. There are some people that are very visually inspired, therefore they're visually able to receive, right? There are people that are very um, tactily inspired, therefore they can receive tactily, right? I am a proprioceptive being, and that is my sense. That is the most yearning. That is the most active. And so I need to move. In
Mhm.
order for me to feel where I am in space, I need to move a lot. I
Mhm.
need to take up as much as I can so that I have the felt sense in my body of how much there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to have learned this at the age that I have, and to be able to offer this knowledge to be accessed by my clients,
Mhm.
because it was not a direct path by any means.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What do you feel is, or like, why do you feel nervous system work is important for women?
Yeah. So I think this question actually goes really beautifully into what I was just speaking about, because, when I was in that medicine journey, my husband was right next to me and he had a completely different experience. He was feeling gratitude. I don't think he'll mind me sharing his experience because he shared it before, but he was blasting out gratitude through his heart, and he was experiencing so many different colors that were moving with the sounds. And his whole body felt ecstatic and like he just wanted to share it, right?
Mhm.
And what I've found with women is there's a little bit stronger of a hard hat that is put on in terms of allowing ecstatic states
Mhm.
into our bodies.
Mhm.
And we are meant to receive as feminine beings. Like, that is our gift, is receiving.
Mhm.
And receiving in our world isn't something you can control, or it doesn't feel like something you can control, right? So I'll get so many women who are like, oh, I give so much love and I don't understand why I don't get the same love back. And my question is, are you allowing? Are you receiving?
You open.
Are you open? And so that's what I found to be more profound with the work that I do specific to women.
Mm-hmm.
Because men and giving and all of the things that the masculine structures and the masculine archetypes offer are tactile. They're visual. They're, you can see them.
Tangible in a way that the feminine gifts and where we radiate, and I don't know what other language, I'm having trouble finding the language for it, but yeah.
I know. But yeah, I mean, the masculine is the structure of the house, and the feminine is the decorations and the experiences that happen in the house,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so seeing things and having that tactile, very obvious is arguably easier in a way. And I don't want to say easier, but just like it's more obvious.
It's more concrete,
It's
maybe.
more concrete. Yeah, it's more concrete.
So I love how science is sort of now validating, like you spoke about the heart and having the brain cells and the energy that we have known and spoken about, but people are like, that can't be true. And then now science is actually able to measure it and validate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also there are going to be things that science can't measure and validate about
Yes.
these gifts, about these energies, and about the creative force that is a feminine spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
The feminine spirit.
Yeah.
And, you know, I never ever want to, as somebody who was raised by a feminist mother, like literally my mom cut school to go protest, you know, and fight for her rights, you know. She was in the newspaper, but and so she's very, you know, she has this mind of like we have to offer the same things because those are the things that are concrete. Those are the things that we can see that are tangible. Those are the things that we can perceivably control. And control is what helps us what? Reduce fear, I suppose. Um
Yeah. And our current culture like values those things, right? It's more concrete.
yeah.
Offerings. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's exciting me is how we're leaning more towards it. And honestly, I think a huge reason this is because of social media
Mm-hmm.
and all the social media, that the way that it gives women permission to,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you just took an hour-long bath in the middle of the week. Good job. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
You're working hard, bitch. I can tell you're processing some shit. I'm proud of you for resting,
Yes.
right?
Yes, and lifting each other up. Like I feel like that is so important in this time and in the realm of social media and in our personal lives to rise together and support one another.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say that again, even though my mom was raised in that feminist world, she is learning to give herself permission to rest and to feel. And we're getting to do it together, and it's just really fucking beautiful. So I'm really proud of her.
Awesome. Yes. Well, as we come to a close, can you tell people like how they can work with you or just get more of you? Your Instagram, you have a podcast, you have a Patreon, you work with people in person and virtually, question mark?
Yes. 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 So,
So, other people.
um, in obviously I can only do body work in person.
Mm-hmm.
I work downtown Spokane.
Yes. And I'll have links in the show notes here. Yeah.
Yeah. I work with women and children primarily, um, children that are dysregulated, that have been through all of the other modes of therapy, women who, again, who've done all the talk therapy and they can still, a common symptom that I'll hear is I know that I'm not in the trauma, but something in my body won't let me relax.
Mm-hmm.
So I work one-on-one, doing both body work and soul retrieval in that realm, and soul coaching sessions one-on-one. I can also do virtually, where I'll teach you a lot of these different ways for you to tap into your intuition, and I'll guide you through soul retrievals to help reparent past selves, past versions of you, and I have a podcast called Letters to Yourself, where I read past journal entries that I have written, and I write a letter to that past version of myself. So it's in essence a little bit of what I do in my soul coaching. Who you are now, what would you say to you then? And in this heart fully coherence place, right? I do have a Patreon, but things are getting weird with Patreon. So I guide meditations. You can find me in person at Anamkara Healing Center on Friday mornings. And also on the gram. I try to post equal amount of fun and playful videos as I do real talk and meditations and movement modalities to help you take power back to move things through your own body.
Yeah, you have some free meditation offerings there that I have seen. So
Yeah. But if you really like my meditations, for the time being, my Patreon is up and running. So if I have over 50 recorded on there of all different lengths, a good chunk of them, at least half of them, are moving meditation. So if you're really new to meditation, that's a really good place to start. I'm also right now guiding, myself, and posting my own experiences of my new round of devotion practice for 40 days. So if you want to get on that, it's not too late. You can just DM me and I'll tag you for accountability, and you can tag me, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, Tara, thank you so much for joining me here today and sharing your stories and wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me, Amana. I loved just being with you, and I love everything that you are doing, and it's such an honor to know that my work is felt even with people that I may not have worked with one-on-one. So thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for tuning in and choosing to spend time with me today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Heart of the Soul. I would truly appreciate if you might choose to leave a rating, review, or share the show with someone that you know. You can support this podcast by donating to it using the PayPal or Venmo links. If you have stories that you would like to share on The Heart of the Soul, please send me an email through my website. I would love to hear from you. If you would like to work with me, I have both one-on-one and group offerings, online and in person. Find out more on my website, birthingnova.love. If you're listening on Spotify, you can now even send me a voice message. Until next time, remember, be brave, be love, be wild, be you, because you are the only you, and be the change that you seek for yourself and for the generations to come. Sending each of you so much love. Love, love, love. Mwah.